welcome back. I'm Ryan, this is Phil, and we'd like to thank you for coming back for the second part of our video in which we're sharing 5 tips for high school or maybe soon to be high school graduates as it relates to planning for their financial futures. In the first video, we talked a little bit about what Roth IRAs are and funding them, and we also talked a little bit about investing money and allowing that to grow for future use and the power of years and what that has on your ability to grow your investments. In this video, we'll be talking a little bit more about the other side of that equation. So when we're talking about investing money, it kind of helps if you have some money to invest. And really that begins with this thing we call budgeting, right? That every dollar that you have available to you, you can do one of 3 things with it. You can give it away, you can spend it, or you can save it for your eventual use in the future. And unfortunately, especially when you're maybe just starting out and don't have quite as much money, 2 of those things tend to get overlooked quite often. You know, most people aren't terribly charitably inclined when they're first starting out, and that's okay. Also, a lot of people ignore this aspect of investing for their retirement future when they're a little bit younger, and that one I'm a little bit less okay with, because the sooner you do start to invest dollars, the more impactful that can become over time, as Phil shared with you in the first video. So once you've headed off to college, or maybe just starting out with your first job, you've got a little bit of income, and maybe for the first time in your life, you're the person that's primarily responsible for deciding what you're going to do with that money. There's no one looking over your shoulder. There's no one cracking a whip on you, making sure you do the right things. It's time to grow up and be an adult and make those decisions. And it's our hope that by taking a little bit of this advice, you can make some decisions that when you get 30, 40, 50 years from now, you can look back on yourself and be happy with the decisions that you made, rather than cursing yourself when you were a little bit younger. So thinking through your budget and what you need to spend money on, some of the things you really don't have a lot of choice in the matter on. So if you've got a home, or if you're renting, you got to make the rent payment or the mortgage payment. You have to pay the bills, you got to keep the electricity turned on, you got to buy food, you got to put gas in the car. Those are things that we generally consider to be fixed expenses, right? They're kind of coming out of your budget really, whether you like it or not. It's the other side of the equation, this idea of discretionary spending, the things that are more fun to spend money on, you know, nicer clothes, vacations, fancy new cars, all that sort of thing, that you don't really need that, but you kind of want it. So oftentimes we get in a situation where we ignore the future and allocate our discretionary dollars onto the things that we want today. And I think it's our challenge to you to try to find that right balance, because the patterns that you can put in place now, the template that you can create for yourself, really has the potential to guide you in a positive direction over time, to where, again, where you're not wanting to look back at your past self and have a sense of anger with yourself for not making better decisions. So try to find that right balance, right? Everyone knows that it's fun to live for today and to do things while you're young, and it's exciting, and I get that. I wouldn't tell you to completely ignore that, but just remember that there will be a future you at some point. So finding that right balance is pretty important. So there is a little bit of a way to cheat that system, and Phil's going to tell you why you shouldn't do that.
Thank you, Ryan. So our 4th tip for you falls under the banner of debt avoidance. And so to kind of set the table, a lot of Americans are really struggling with trying to get out from under debt. And so we're hoping that we're getting these tips to you early enough that you can avoid getting into that position in the entirety. And so what are we really talking about here? It goes back to what Ryan was talking about regarding budgeting, and it is choosing to spend money that we don't really have. You know, wanting something so badly, we go out and we get it, whether we have the money to buy it or not. And so my encouragement to you is try very hard to avoid buying things that you can't pay for. And so unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of temptation. If you haven't gotten to college campus yet, when you get there, you are likely going to be approached by somebody trying to entice you to get a credit card. And credit cards generally are a good way to get in trouble fast. So I would just encourage you, I got a credit card. Well, sure, I got a credit card. And it makes it easy to buy things that you don't have money for. And you tell yourself, well, when I get that summer job, I'll earn enough money that I can pay this off. And next thing you know, you're paying 18 or 20% interest on it, if not more. and you're paying a lot more for that thing that you bought, whether that was the spring break trip or whether it was some clothes or pizza or whatever it is, and it's costing you a lot more than what the item actually cost. It's a really good discipline to get into to really limit your use of debt. And the advice that I would offer is try to only use debt on things that will be worth more in the future than they are today. It's what am I talking about? Well, eventually, if you think about buying a house, a mortgage for a house is something that we would consider to be good debt. Being intentional about how you pay that back, that's another part of the conversation. But that's an asset that should grow in value slowly over time, but you should have something that's worth more than you borrowed. In contrast, if you buy a car, cars are assets that become less valuable over time, and therefore it's possible that you could borrow money and not be paying it back quickly enough. You could actually owe more than the car's worth at some point. That's not good debt. My encouragement would be, yes, you need transportation, you need a car. Buy a car that can get you from point A to point B, but maybe avoid spending the extra money to get the one you want until you actually have the money to buy the one you want. The other thing, again, you're going to be presented with a lot of opportunities. It's a challenge for our society in general. I just hope for you that you can avoid some of that and maybe not have to fight to get out from behind the 8 ball later in life, which is, boy, I was in that position a bit myself, and that's a tough position to be in, and there are a lot of folks who spend years and years and years trying to get out from under that debt. That brings us to our last and final point. If you are going to college and somebody or some group of somebodies is helping you pay for that tuition, room, and board, just have a heart of gratitude there and show some appreciation for that help. College today is very expensive, and if you have a parent or a grandparent or if you've earned some kind of scholarship, whoever's helping you pay those college costs, let them know how much you appreciate it, because that's one of the things that will be tremendously impactful on you when you're in your 20s, to not be carrying as much student debt, or if you're really fortunate to not be carrying any student debt as you go out after you graduate from college and start life post-graduation. One last thing that we share, we're going to have a link to a very entertaining video. It's a skit from Saturday Night Live that Ryan absolutely loves, that helps reinforce what we talked about today around when should you borrow to acquire things. And I think you're really going to enjoy it.